February 1315. The Great Famine has begun. A farmer in England wakes before dawn to a world that offers almost nothing. The harvest failed last autumn. The rains came too early and never stopped. Crops rotted in the fields. Livestock grew sick on mouldy grain. Snow blankets the ground now. The temperature hovers just above freezing. Cold enough to kill, not cold enough to preserve. The nearest town is 3 days' walk. There will be no help coming. No emergency services. No government relief programs. This man has a wife, 3 children. His elderly mother lives with them. 6 mouths requiring food, warmth, and hope through months of darkness still ahead. By modern standards, this situation is unsurvivable. No refrigeration, no central heating, no antibiotics if illness strikes, no grocery stores to provide what the land cannot, no insurance policies to cushion disaster, and yet this family will survive the winter. Not all of them, perhaps. The famine of 1315 killed hundreds of thousands across Europe. But many families endured, many communities persisted, many individuals walked out of that winter and into spring, weakened but alive. How? The easy answer is luck. The dismissive answer is that they simply suffered, and some happened to survive. But the true answer is far more interesting. These people were not lucky. They were not merely desperate. They were prepared in ways that modern humans have almost entirely forgotten. They possessed knowledge, practical, tested, refined across generations, that made them remarkably difficult to kill. Welcome to the Medieval Advantage. I'm glad you're here. On this channel, we explore the forgotten wisdom of our ancestors. Not because the past was perfect, it certainly was not. Medieval life was brutal in ways we can barely comprehend from our climate-controlled comfort. But brutality and wisdom are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes the harshest conditions produce the deepest understanding of what humans actually need to survive. And survival knowledge, once lost, does not automatically return when we need it again. Today, we're examining 7 survival skills that medieval people practiced as naturally as breathing. Skills that made ordinary farmers, craftsmen, and labourers extraordinarily resilient. Skills that we have almost completely abandoned and may desperately need to recover. This is not nostalgia. This is not rejection of modern medicine or technology. This is asking a simple question that most people never consider. What did we trade away when we traded hardship for convenience? Let's begin with food. Not how medieval people grew food or cooked food, but how they kept food from killing them or disappearing when they needed it most. Modern food security rests on invisible systems, refrigeration that requires constant electricity, supply chains that span continents, packaging designed in laboratories, grocery stores restocked by trucks that arrive like clockwork. When these systems work, they work magnificently. Fresh produce in January, meat preserved perfectly for weeks, abundance that previous generations could never have imagined. But these systems share a fatal characteristic. They are single points of failure. Lose electricity for 1 week, and everything in your refrigerator spoils. Disrupt transportation networks, and grocery shelves empty within days. We witnessed this during recent global disruptions. The speed with which modern abundance can transform into modern scarcity. Medieval food preservation operated on completely different principles. There was no single system to fail. There were dozens of overlapping methods, each providing backup for the others. Meat was salted in barrels, packed with enough salt to draw out moisture and create an environment hostile to bacteria. But the same meat might also be smoked, adding another layer of protection through antimicrobial compounds deposited by wood smoke, and some portion might be dried into strips that required no special storage at all. Vegetables were fermented in crocks, transformed by beneficial bacteria into something that would not spoil for months. But they were also stored fresh in root cellars, dug beneath the frost line. where stable temperatures slowed decay without stopping it entirely. And some were dried, some pickled in vinegar, some preserved in honey. Fish was salted, smoked, and dried simultaneously in many cases. A single catch might be preserved through 3 or 4 different methods, ensuring that failure of one approach didn't mean total loss. This redundancy wasn't inefficiency. It was intelligent risk management developed over centuries of trial and consequence. A medieval family that lost their salted meat to spoilage still had smoked meat. If the root cellar flooded, there was still fermented cabbage. If one system failed, others remained sound. Modern families have no such redundancy. When the refrigerator fails, everything fails. This is the first forgotten skill. Not any single preservation method, but the mindset of layered security. The understanding that survival depends not on one perfect system, but on multiple imperfect systems backing each other up. Now consider cold. Modern people fear cold in ways medieval people could not afford to. We heat our homes to 70 degrees and panic when temperatures drop unexpectedly. We consider 50 degrees uncomfortable and 30 degrees dangerous. Medieval people lived through winters that would hospitalize most modern individuals. They did this not by being tougher, though physical hardening certainly played a role, but by understanding cold as a problem to be managed systematically, not an emergency to be escaped. The first principle was thermal layering. Clothing was not about single heavy garments, but about multiple layers trapping air between them. Air is an excellent insulator. The more layers, the more trapped air, the more warmth retained. Wool remained warm even when wet, a property that modern synthetic materials often cannot match. Medieval people didn't wear one heavy coat. They wore linen against the skin, wool over that, more wool over that, and outer layers designed to block wind. Each layer served a purpose. Together, they created a personal heating system that required no external energy. The second principle was strategic fire management. Wood was precious. You could not simply burn unlimited fuel to maintain comfortable temperatures. Fires were built for maximum heat retention, not maximum flame. Coals were preserved overnight and rekindled in the morning. Homes were designed to concentrate heat in sleeping areas while allowing other spaces to remain cold. The third principle was metabolic adaptation. Medieval diets in winter were deliberately high in animal fat. This wasn't ignorance about nutrition, it was thermal intelligence. Fat provides sustained energy and supports the body's heat generation from within. A body burning fat stays warmer than a body burning only carbohydrates. Cold exposure itself created adaptation. Bodies accustomed to cold develop better circulation, to extremities, more efficient heat conservation, and greater tolerance for temperature variation. Medieval people didn't merely endure cold, they adapted to it physiologically in ways modern people never develop because we never need to. Now consider injury. When a medieval farmer gashed his leg on a scythe, there was no emergency room, no antibiotics, no surgical intervention, no sterile bandages manufactured in factories. And yet people survived injuries that would terrify us today. The approach was fundamentally different from modern medicine, not because medieval people lacked knowledge, but because they understood healing differently. Wounds were cleaned with wine or vinegar, mild antimicrobials that reduced bacterial contamination without destroying tissue. Herbal preparations containing yarrow, plantain, and honey were applied. These weren't superstitions. Modern research confirms their antimicrobial and tissue-regenerating properties. But here's what truly distinguished medieval injury management. They did not suppress the body's healing response. When you take modern anti-inflammatory drugs, you reduce swelling and pain. You feel better quickly. But inflammation exists for a reason. It brings immune cells to the injury. It initiates tissue repair. It protects the damaged area. Medieval people couldn't suppress inflammation even if they wanted to, so they worked with it instead. They rested injured limbs completely. They allowed swelling to run its course. They supported the body's process rather than overriding it. The result was often slower initial recovery, but more complete long-term healing. Fewer chronic injuries, less lingering damage, less dependency on ongoing treatment. This was not primitive medicine. This was aligned medicine. Sleep presents another forgotten skill that shaped medieval mental resilience. We've discussed segmented sleep in previous videos, but its survival implications deserve emphasis here. Medieval people did not sleep in one 8-hour block. They slept in 2 phases, first sleep and second sleep, with a waking period of 1 to 3 hours between them. During this midnight interval, they rested quietly, tended fires, prayed, talked softly, or simply lay in peaceful darkness. This pattern was not dysfunction. It was how human biology operated before artificial lighting compressed our nights. What made this a survival skill? The waking period provided time for mental processing that modern people rarely experience. Thoughts could settle, emotions could integrate, the mind could work through problems without the pressure of daytime demands. Medieval people woke in darkness without panic because waking was expected. Modern people wake at 3 in the morning and immediately flood their systems with stress hormones, convinced something is wrong. The medieval relationship with night waking built psychological resilience that we have largely lost. They were comfortable with darkness, with silence, with being awake when nothing demanded their attention. This comfort translated to broader psychological stability. People who aren't afraid of their own wakefulness handle other fears more effectively. Disease avoidance operated on similar principles of pattern recognition and systems thinking. Medieval people didn't understand germ theory. They couldn't see bacteria or viruses. They had no concept of microscopic pathogens, but they observed patterns. They noticed that certain practices correlated with health and others with sickness, and they built systems based on these observations. Wells were located away from waste areas, not because they understood contamination chemistry, but because they noticed people got sick when these things were close together. Homes were designed with airflow in mind. Certain foods were avoided during certain seasons. Sick individuals were isolated from healthy ones. These practices weren't always correct. Medieval people made mistakes, but the fundamental approach, observation, pattern recognition, systematic prevention, often produced results that mirror modern public health principles. Prevention was valued over treatment because treatment options were limited. You avoided disease because you couldn't easily cure it. This mindset created vigilance that modern medicine has partly eroded. We fear disease less because we trust treatment more. But trust in treatment can become neglect of prevention. Community interdependence was perhaps the most overlooked survival skill of all. Modern culture celebrates individual self-sufficiency. We admire people who need nothing from anyone. We build lives designed to minimize dependency on others. Medieval survival required the opposite. No single person possessed all necessary skills. No single family could perform all required labor. No individual could survive extended crisis alone. Communities functioned as networks of distributed competence. One family knew animal husbandry deeply. Another understood food preservation. Another held knowledge of medicinal plants. Another could build and repair structures. Knowledge was transmitted continuously, from elders to youth, from skilled to unskilled, from neighbor to neighbor. If one person died, their knowledge didn't die with them because it had already been shared. This created redundancy at the community level, just as preservation methods created redundancy at the household level. No single point of failure, no irreplaceable individual. Modern hyper-individualism has broken these networks. We have unprecedented access to information, but often lack practical knowledge held in living memory. We have global connections, but sometimes don't know our neighbors' names. When systems fail, Isolated individuals fail with them. Connected communities absorb shocks. The final skill was psychological, and perhaps most important of all. Medieval people expected hardship, not because they were pessimistic, but because hardship was normal. Winter came every year. Harvests sometimes failed. Illness struck without warning. Death was a familiar presence. This expectation didn't create despair, it created preparation. When you expect difficulty, you prepare for it. When you prepare for difficulty, you fear it less. When you fear it less, you respond more effectively when it arrives. Modern people often expect comfort as the default. When disruption comes, it feels like violation, something wrong that shouldn't be happening. This interpretation adds psychological suffering to physical difficulty. Medieval people experienced the same physical hardships, but often less psychological suffering because their expectations aligned with reality. This is not an argument that suffering is good. It's an observation that relationship to suffering shapes its impact. Let's return to that English farmer in February 1315. The Great Famine will kill perhaps 10% of England's population. This is genuine catastrophe. Nothing here minimizes that suffering, but the families who survive will not survive through luck alone. They will survive because their salted meat held through March, because their fermented vegetables provided nutrition when nothing fresh existed, because their layered wool clothing retained heat through freezing nights, because their bodies had adapted to cold across years of exposure, because their wounds healed without pharmaceutical intervention, because they slept in alignment with darkness and woke without panic, because their community shared labour when individual families faltered, because they expected winter and prepared for it rather than hoping it wouldn't come. This was the medieval advantage. Not strength, not bravery, not suffering well. Preparation, systems, alignment, redundancy. What happens when we need these skills and no longer have them? What happens when the systems we depend on fail and we have no backup? These are not hypothetical questions. They're quiet emergencies waiting in a future none of us can fully predict. In the next video, we'll examine another forgotten system, how medieval communities managed water and waste in ways that prevented disease for generations. It challenges nearly everything you've been taught about medieval hygiene. Thank you for watching this video. I genuinely appreciate you spending this time thinking through these ideas with me. If this exploration has shifted how you understand survival and resilience, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Medieval Advantage channel. Your support allows us to continue uncovering knowledge that modern life has quietly buried. I'll see you in the next one.